I don't think it was a skinwalker that I came across, which is a person who practices bad medicine. Or maybe it was. I'll let you decide after I tell you about my encounter. So my mom used to tell me that mirrors are not just for fixing your hair. They are actually windows. She told us growing up that they don't just show your reflection. They can trap things, reveal the truth, or even reflect things that don't belong in this world. That's why growing up, my mom only let us use the mirror when we would have to brush our hair or get ready. Then again, when have you ever known someone to use mirrors for something else, aside from those things? However, she always covered the mirrors at night, especially during ceremonies, or when someone passed away. You know how when you leave or go out, you make sure your doors are locked, or you make sure you have your wallet, your keys and stuff. I had covering mirrors in the house before we left on that list, especially when we would have ceremonies. I never quite understood what she meant, not until that day at the powwow, not until I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, I think. For those who might not know, a powwow is more than just a gathering. It's a celebration of our culture, the songs and the dances. Families come together, dancers wear regalia, you hear the drums, and our languages and traditions are kept alive. There are ceremonies, honor, and sometimes competition, but above everything else, it's where we all come together. Growing up very traditional came with knowing how to powwow dance. Well, learning. I went to powwow club, and I made a lot of friends that I still know today. As a kid, I was always shy and reserved, but I was always around watching and listening. Many of the people that were there at the club were younger back then, and today when I go there's only elders and grandparents. But that's alright, I have always loved dancing, and as I grew up, it was always the same crowds in surrounding areas, and even at the reserve powwows. As I grew older, I was always happy to see everyone in every season, new regalia and new dances. Now, there was always this one dancer who stayed in the same outfit for many years, and he was well known in the community. He was a very proud dancer as well. One day at a weekend-long powwow, I was with my family and my son who was small at that time. I was getting ready, and I had a mirror on me to fix my plumes and get my hair sprayed and everything else. I was looking in the mirror on the hood of the car, and I was trying to hurry as the grand entry was starting soon. And guess who I see? This longtime dancer there getting ready as well in the corner of the mirror. I could see him putting his stuff on and attaching strings to keep his stuff up, and I started thinking to myself, oh, he's rushing too, just like me. His back was facing me, but from the outfit I knew it was him. Then he turned around to his side, and I was still looking at myself in the mirror. However, when he did, what I saw shocked me to the core of my soul. Now I want to paint you the scene. It's daylight, there's people everywhere, laughing and socializing, and we could all hear the person saying that dancers needed to make their way to the harbor. But this dancer, as he turned, and I'm not sure how to describe it, but I will never forget that image. His head, his face, it wasn't human. There was no long gray hair, which he always had. There was no glasses on his face, and no wrinkled brown skin. There was nothing. There was only a skull, and it had flesh spots on it. It looked like a skull that was decomposing. I got goosebumps, and my son was sitting beside me, sitting on a chair, drinking from a sippy cup. I grabbed him and our stuff. This time I physically turned around and looked at the man again, and he looked normal. I didn't know what to do. I just panicked and went to sit with my family, and I didn't say anything. I kept my son close to me all day, and when I danced my category, I made sure my mom was holding him. Throughout the whole day, I was just asking myself if I already saw that, or if I was just imagining. When the evening came for grand entry again, I was in line to enter the harbor, and I was in front of another dancer who happened to have a mirror. It was on her back. As we entered the harbor, I noticed that the dancer I saw earlier was behind us, just a few yards away. So when we lined up and stopped for the honor song, I tried to look in the mirror of the dancer in front of me to see where this guy was at. I saw him. He looked normal. As the rest of the day went on, I just avoided going around them. I did grow up learning that when we see stuff like this, that it's really not good. Now, it's been a while since I seen this dancer because I pulled away due to personal circumstances. But I do believe that I was shown a really evil side of this person that no one was seeing at this time because he was getting so much attention in the powwow community. I say this because of what happened down the road the next few years. I started to hear that he's losing a lot of respect. I actually talked with a friend and I started hearing things, little rumors here and there. Rumors that people no longer invite that dancer to their powwows. Some say they don't trust him anymore. Some say something's just off about him. And deep down, I knew it. I just knew it. I still go to some powwows, not always to dance, sometimes just to watch, support, and be there. But every now and then, he still shows up, still walks around, but something's different. His outfit has also changed. I'm not sure if he got into something dark. I believe he was either wrapped up in bad medicine, or he's starting to walk that path. And honestly, I think when I saw his reflection, or whatever that was, maybe I was seeing the spirit inside of him, starting to rot away. My son was around 2 when this happened. He's 11 now. So all of this happened in the span of 9 years. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen this at powwows or anywhere at traditional gatherings or ceremonies. I feel like sometimes when I think about it, no one would believe me. But what do you all think? Has anyone had any experiences like this? Or do y'all have an idea of what I saw? This is my first time telling the story. I felt like I had to get it off my back. At least somebody could hear it. This happened 2 years ago, and my parents own a cabin in North Saskatchewan. And yeah, I'm actually in North Canada. I decided I wanted to spend some time by myself up there. My parents agreed because they wanted me out of their attic. I've been really into the paranormal the past few months, so I found the idea of being by myself and isolated with whatever is out there in the North Forest pretty comforting. So I drive up there in late November. I stocked up on food to last a few months. I leave my phone at home since I only use it for internet related stuff anyways. The cabin has electricity and satellite but no internet, but all my video games are offline anyways, so it doesn't really matter. I bring a hunting rifle with me as well, obviously for hunting. The cabin has a basic layout with an extension added on when my sister and I were born. It was done to add extra room for us on vacations up here. It's mostly made out of wood except for the thin roof that's on the extension. When I show up, I unpack all my stuff and I just sit there and chill. The cabin is really close to a tree line. This is because the cabin was actually built on a very small clearing. Others would find this claustrophobic. I find it relaxful when it came to stuff like this. The first night I chill and listen to the sounds of the animals as I fall asleep. No TV, just relaxing and easing into my new environment. That's when I hear what sounds like a deer or a moose out in the distance. Anyways, the first day I get all my winter clothes on and head into the woods. I stay close by the trees where the snow was easy to walk through. I'm reminded of all the times I walked through these woods as a kid with family. I decided to get out further and I travel in parts that I'd never been before. Even when I was a kid, my parents would never tell us where we could and couldn't go. They just never got around it. I then hear that sound off in the distance, and I'm starting to think, maybe I can get up close and have a good look at it. Most of them are kind of dangerous up here since they're not familiar with people. But I figure I could climb a tree if it charges or something for some reason. I walked to where the noise was coming from, and the sound doesn't get any louder. I figure it must be walking away from me, but I also can't find any tracks. I decided that it's actually a lot further away than I thought it was, and I couldn't even chase after it if I wanted to. After only like 7 hours of daylight, I started to head back because I don't want to get caught out here in the darkness. It's not the kind of place you want to get lost in at any point. Once I get back home, I started to think about the whole thing. I do get a little bit creeped out, just the fact of being out here by myself, and so I just cook dinner and go to bed. The next day when I go outside for a walk, I find a rotting moose with all the skin on its head chewed off. I figure it was most likely maggots or other small animals picking away at it. At one point I tried to go hunting for deer or anything else, but I could never find tracks despite all the calls I heard at night, mostly female for some reason. I always told myself that they must be a lot further out than I usually venture to. But one day, I went out and actually managed to snag a small buck, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is what I came out here for. I had never shot one by myself before, so I had no idea how to take care of the meat. I decided to leave it till tomorrow and butcher it when I woke up. I went full dumbass mode and left it hanging outside as to not stink up the cabin. The next day, I went out and there were huge bites taken out of it. I'm thinking, oh great, some animals are in here now. Some animal got to it first and mangled it to pieces. Whatever it was already went at it on the head for some reason. I couldn't pick out what animal would have made the bite marks, but I decided to stop walking out so far into the woods for now. I even start to wonder how I even got a male buck if all the calls I heard were female. I know what the calls are, and these were more long, drawn out, indicating female. I started to get creeped out, since I do get anxious about random stuff anyways, but I quickly made myself forget about it, since I did promise myself that I would stay for the full few months and not go home early. The next night I couldn't sleep because of my anxious thoughts. You know how insomnia works and stuff. I began to hear a very slight noise. It was a very quiet night, so I would be able to hear something outside if anything was there, but I couldn't make out what it was. Eventually it got louder, as if the sound itself was frustrated. I realized something must be making it, so I sat up and listened to it. Like something being scraped over the top of wood. The sound traveled all the way across the cabin past where I was sleeping, and into the extension and all the way around again. The second time it passed the extension, it stopped right where I was sitting on the bed for just a moment, and then it continued. This went on for a few minutes, but eventually it stopped, and then I simply just passed out. The next day I had to convince myself that what happened wasn't a dream. I began to brainstorm an idea about some intelligent animal. This can't just be a coincidence, I thought. In the middle of the day, I built the courage to go outside and see what happened. There were scratches on the snow-covered walls, not enough to wreck the wood, but enough to see a pattern of scratches that were made more than a few feet above the ground. This definitely wasn't just some dumb animal. I finally decided to take a look at my door. The scratches were serious on the wooden door, as if someone with big fingernails spent hours scraping at it. I started tripping balls on fear at this point. Whatever it was smart enough to tell that the door was the way inside, but obviously predatory. I came to the conclusion that whatever this was must have been the same thing that mauled the buck that I had caught. Finally decided to look at the footprints. The best way to describe them was like bare footprints, but really long. I know for a fact that whatever this was definitely not a bear. That's when I began to realize something. There were no footprints around the cabin, just the ones leading up to it and leaving. This thing must have been climbing around my walls, dragging its nails to create the scratches. This was definitely not a bear. I just wanted to get out of there at this point, but the sun started to go down and storm clouds started moving in. I had been out there for just 2 hours just looking at all this stuff. I couldn't leave in a blizzard or in the dark, so I just locked myself in and went to bed with my gun. My mind started racing when night hit. The wind was blowing outside, but off in the distance, I heard that same noise again. I began to put 2 and 2 together. Whatever this thing was, it was calling male animals by mimicking female mating calls. I know it preferred male animals since they had more meat. When I left that damn buck outside, it could tell that I was here. In fact, the first full day that I spent here when I was chasing that moose call, it could have been right above me in a tree or something. My train of thought was stopped when I heard that damn scratching noise again. I barely made it out because the blizzard was so loud, but I could still recognize it. Either it saw me as a rival or as prey. At this point, I'm not sure which was worse. I know this thing was good at climbing because I heard the sounds of feet on the wooden roof and very faintly on the snow. Suddenly, the sound changed to feet. It was right above me. I couldn't handle this anymore, but I know I couldn't leave because that's exactly what it wanted. The banging sounds on the thin roof went on for what felt like hours as the storm went on. Eventually it went away, and I thought, thank God. The blizzard began to die down too. I could hear better now, but I was not ready for what happened next. That's when I heard a woman's voice outside, not making any words, just babbling. I thought, fuck, this barefoot demon thing, it's trying to trick me like you did all those moose and deer. The sound was very close, at least within the tree line. I ended up grabbing a big ass flashlight and went to open one of the windows. I shined it outside towards where the sound was coming from. That's when I saw it. This ungodly 7-foot tall, slim, muscular build thing. My eyes eventually adjusted to what I was looking at. The face was a hideous interpretation of a human, almost like if you described to an alien what a person looked like, and then they fed the drawing to dogs. The nose was upturned like a bat, facing directly at me. Its eyes weren't sunken in like you would suspect. They were protruding out. The eyes looked almost swollen. Its mouth was round and way too big. The face was shaped like a baboon's face, very oval with a heavy brow ridge, but it was incredibly flat, and its forehead was big. It started moving its lips, almost like it was trying to talk, except all it looked like at this point seemed to be smiling at me. Its hands were a combination of sloth and human hands. In one of its hands, it held the head of a buck. All the skin had been chewed off of it. After getting a good look at it, I took a shot at it. I'm not sure if I hit it since I dropped the flashlight, but that's when I saw it drop the head and run off into the woods. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed to it, and I could barely make out a shape climbing a tree in seconds, and then jumping from one tree to another. Fuck you and this cabin. I ended up not sleeping the rest of the night, and I left in the morning. I came home early and told my parents I was feeling lonely as an excuse to come back. I never told them what happened because they would have assumed that I was taking drugs. Anyways, this is most likely the only time that I'll ever tell this story. I don't believe in magic or even in forest demons or anything like that. I'm not sure what I saw out there. I'm not gonna give it a stupid name like all you other guys do when they see something like this. But I know one thing's for sure. I'm never going back to North Saskatchewan as long as I live. I have a story to share, but I am gonna warn you. It contains some very uncomfortable details. It's a story that's been passed around a bunch of times. Maybe you heard it before, but I want to share it from the perspective of my mom. She said there was a little boy that lived with his grandparents in an area north of here. His grandfather would leave some nights saying that he would go to a family member's to play cards and to come back late in the night. The grandmother eventually got curious about these nights, especially because sometimes he wouldn't even come back till the next day. So she had the boy follow his grandfather just to see where he would go. Following his grandfather, they would pass the relative's home that he was supposedly playing cards in. Eventually they came to a canyon edge. The boy then saw his grandfather disappear down the canyon wall. Moving closer, he saw a very narrow path that would allow the person to walk down the canyon wall. Going down the path, he saw his grandfather taking his clothes off and leaving his clothes at the entrance. Creeping down, he came to a cave entrance that was covered by animal skins. Looking in, he saw his grandfather and his grandfather's family members, all naked, sitting around a fire, passing a bowl of some liquid around, and watching two people, doing it. He recognized one of them as his uncle, and the other being one of his own uncle's daughter. They ended up seeing him, and they dragged him in, and they placed him in some back room that looked to be used as storage. He saw some animal skins and bones with what looked to be the corpse of an infant. After a while, they had the boy join them, and they told him to undress and to, quote unquote, do it with one of his family members that was there. The boy noticed that they seemed to be under the influence of what was in the bowl, the one that they were passing around, and that they were also unsteady on their feet. That's when he chose that he was going to try to leave, and as he began to take his shirt off, just to deceive that he was going to stay and do as they asked. But when they let their guard down, he took off running as fast as he could. Some of them tried to follow him out, but they ended up falling down the canyon wall. Continuing to run, he eventually got back to his grandmother. Just before he approached the hogan, he saw a coyote wandering around the area, so he stopped and looked at it as it was digging a hole in the ground, and it dropped something in the hole, and then it just covered it. Seeing the coyote leave, he ran into the hogan and told his grandmother everything that he saw. She listened to everything that he said, so they drove away to go to a medicine man the grandmother knew of. They ended up conducting some sort of ceremony and singing. Then the medicine man had the boy say the name of each person that he saw in the cave. And he also told the grandmother that the bundle the boy saw, the one that the coyote buried, it actually contained some of her hair and other personal things. Eventually, every person that the boy named ended up dying. My mom used to finish this story telling me to never get involved with bad medicine. The land remembers everything, and it has history. That's why the elders taught us, before you build, before you move in, before you enter someone's home, before you even step foot on certain grounds, you should always pray. You should always ask for permission. Sometimes there are things still there, spirits that never leave, not in the walls, but in the land itself. Here in the Pine Ridge REZ, there's a school called Pahinsenteo, Iowa, that was open in 2008. If you live around here, you know about it, or you even heard stories about it. For those who are closer to my age, will know that the school was built to replace an older one. The older one was built back in the late 60s, or early 70s, and you also heard stories about it, shadow figures, a little girl, and also a bunch of other things. My dad was in actual security there in the late 80s, and he would tell me so many stories and encounters about this. He retired around the transition to the new school. It has kindergarten through 8th grade. It's a very new school, and you would think that it would not have anything wrong with it. Well, any bad history at that, or any bad energy. And whenever people would say this, I always remind them that the land it was built on was there way before the foundation was even built, even before the community of Porcupine existed. At first, nothing happened. All the stories of the dark shadows and things people had witnessed in the previous school didn't, quote-unquote, move with the school to the new facility, even though the old school playground and gym were less than 300 yards south of the new school. All of that didn't last very long. This story is one that my friend told me. He ended up taking my dad's old spot after he retired. Well, actually after they had a hard time keeping anyone there. People kept quitting, and that's when he stepped in. Like how all things begin, it started small. Some of the teachers said that they would hear footsteps, things would go missing, and then reappear in some other classroom. Eventually, the teachers stopped staying late, and they would leave as soon as they could. The women that would have to stay late or work longer hours would actually quit after a few weeks. Then security guards and janitors started doing the same. They would leave early or just quit. The HR manager was getting frustrated from having to hire janitors and different security guards every few months. The last security guard he hired before my friend told him why he was resigning. Keep in mind that my friend said that the HR manager was not a believer, as you will see. So when the security said why he was quitting, The HR manager just laughed about it. That's when he brought my friend on board, and he also brought a new janitor. He decided to be honest with them and told them why the previous people had quit. The new janitor didn't say anything, but my friend did tell him that such things do exist. However, he said it was most likely the building settling in its foundation. He said that he was a labor worker when it was being constructed, and that is what the engineers had said the building was going to do for a few years after it was completed. They said even though the ground was compacted, the weight of the building was going to put pressure on the ground, and it would eventually settle completely. The HR manager agreed with him and said to let him know if there were any issues. So he started the job, and for 2 weeks nothing happened. But after that, Monday morning rolled around, and my friend went into the HR manager's office. For the sake of this story, I will call my friend Donnie. Don't ask me why, but that's what I'm gonna call him. So Donnie was asking him who all had keys to the building. The HR manager said as far as he knew, the ones with keys were the principal, the janitor, some teachers whose classrooms were near the doors, as they were designated as fire exit, and also himself. He ended up asking Donnie why. Donnie told him that over the weekend, he was doing his checks when he saw a boy near the fire exit doors. He yelled out at him, but he took off running. Then he disappeared by the fire exit doors. So Donnie requested if he could remind the teachers near the doors to be sure that the doors were locked whenever they left on Friday. The HR manager said that he would remind them, and so Donnie got up to leave his office, not wanting to start an argument with the teachers about the doors. He asked if it was caught on the school cameras. Donnie then pulled out a little notebook from his pocket, and he gave him the time of when he saw the little boy. The HR manager told him that he would talk to the teachers and to the principal about it. Donnie said that the HR manager ended up talking with the principal, and he just shook his head. He said that before he puts a memo out to the teachers about what Donnie said, he wanted to see the security tape. They both ended up reviewing the security camera, and just like Donnie said, they could see that boy running around in the school, and as Donnie actually chased him, he disappeared by the exit doors. So a memo was put out to all the staff to make sure that the doors were locked and to double check them before they went home. By now, Donnie knew that the message had been sent to everyone, so he figured this time there wouldn't be any more break-ins. Also, the story about the boy quickly circulated around the school, among the staff, and yes, even to the kids themselves. If you're a teacher at a school, then you know that nothing can stay hidden. So when Friday rolled around, all the teachers double-checked all the doors to make sure they were locked, and they all went home. The following Monday, Donnie told me that he was once again in the office, talking to the HR manager that the boy was back. He gave the time and location. This time he was in the lower level of the school running around. He lost him in the cafeteria, and he thought he ran into the gym and out the exit doors in the gym. This time, Donnie, the principal, and the HR manager reviewed the security tape. Once again, they saw the boy running away down the lower level hallway and towards the cafeteria, where he disappeared. Nothing else happened after that. But when that Friday came around, the principal and the HR manager and Donnie all personally checked all the doors, and they were all locked like they were supposed to. Satisfied that there was no way that the boy could come in, they went home for the weekend, while Donnie stayed behind. Everybody was wrong. Donnie was waiting for them on Monday again. He said that the boy came back over the weekend. All three of them looked at the video as the boy ran around the upper level and eventually took off towards the north door, which was the front door of the school. On camera, you could see that Donnie was behind them about 15 yards as he made a turn towards the front door and then just disappeared. The principal and the HR manager were all confused as they had all checked the doors before they left. Things got busy that week and everybody just put it to the side until Friday came along. When Donnie arrived, the principal and HR manager were still there. Basically, they told him that they need to find out who this kid is and that the HR manager was going to stay with him tonight and help Donnie out. My friend said this was perfect. 1, they could find out who this boy was, and 2, As my friend said, if it is a spirit, this would turn this non-believer into a believer. So the principal left, and only the HR manager and Donnie stayed behind. Once inside, the HR manager and Donnie went to the security office. They both got a two-way radio and settled in for the night. Donnie left on his first round of checks in the building, while the manager stayed at the cameras watching. As the night went on, every once in a while Donnie would make eye contact with the cameras as he made his way back to the office from the lower level classrooms to the upper level classrooms and the library. Everything was quiet until around 3 a.m. when Donnie went on his rounds. He started on the lower level and made his way to the upper. When he got to the end of the hallway, that's when he got on the two-way radio. He said that the manager told him that he could see the little boy down in the lower level. He said that he must have just passed him, or maybe he was hiding in the last classroom as he walked by. Donnie turned around and went back downstairs right away. He got to the bottom and called the manager back on the two-way. He asked where he went. The manager said over the radio that he saw the little boy sneaking towards the restrooms at the end of the hall by the cafeteria. Donnie just shined his flashlight down the hall, and that's when he caught a glimpse of the boy looking at him around the corner of the boy's bathroom. Donnie yelled at him, and that's when he took off running down towards the bathroom. But before he could get there, he said he saw a shadow come out and headed towards the cafeteria and the gym. He also could hear feet running down towards the gym as he came around the bathroom. That's when he heard the gym doors open and close. Donnie kept running, and as he came into the gym, he could see the shadow go out the other gym door and back into the cafeteria. He ran towards the same door, but at this point, any footsteps had stopped. That's when he called the manager over the radio, asking if he saw where the little boy went. The manager came back and said that the boy was running down the hallway. The manager came back and said that the little boy was actually running down the hallway he had just come from. Apparently, he was making a big circle. Before Donnie could say anything, he saw the boy peek out at the end of the hallway, so he took off running. On the cameras, the manager could see the little boy running away from Donnie, down the hallway towards the cafeteria, through the gym doors, and then coming back out the other side. Donnie could also be seen running down the hallway again. The manager then caught the little boy as he started running down the upper level hallway into the library and the front office. The manager saw Donnie as he came out into the upper level hallway, so he stopped and called him on the radio, and that he could actually see him hiding at the end of the hallway. As he said that, Donnie saw the little boy peek around the corner at him. He yelled at him again and took off running as the boy took off towards the front door. As he came around the end of the hallway, he could see that no one was there as he looked towards the front door. So he stopped and called the manager over the radio, asking which way the boy ran. When he went out the door, the manager radioed back. He said the little boy was out front by the front door. Donnie looked towards the front door, but he didn't see anyone. So he called the manager again over the radio, asking him where's he at. The manager then said that he was right there at the front door, but he sounded scared over the radio. "Are you sure?" Donnie asked. The manager then said, "He's right there. Don't you see him? He's looking back at you through the glass." Donnie then said, "I don't see anybody." The manager then said, "He's right there. He's looking right at you. There's no one here, dude. What are you talking about?" Then, the radio went dead. Donnie shined his flashlight towards the front door, but there was nothing there. He tried calling the manager back, but there was no answer. So he shined his flashlight one last time, and so he made his way back into the security office. When he walked in, the manager was sitting there, staring at the monitor. He was pale white. "Dude, are you good?" Donnie asked. He shook his head yes, and pointed to the screen. Donnie was looking, but like when he was there was nothing on camera. It took a minute for the manager to compose himself, and after a few minutes of talking what the heck is going on, Donnie said that he wanted to see where the boy was right in front of him, that he apparently just missed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those surveillance security programs, but they're really glitchy, and it takes a while to get to the time frame that you wanted to get to. Regardless, they started to play back, and there, right in front of him, on video, was the little boy. He had his hands cupped to the glass of the front door. While he was looking at Donnie, he could see himself talking on the radio, looking towards the front door and then shining his flashlight towards it. The little boy kept his hands cupped alongside his face while he looked in. His flashlight made him lean back away from the window, but then he went back to looking back at him. As the video kept rolling, he could see himself walking away as the little boy came in and followed him down the hallway, slowly, right behind him. They continued watching, silent, frozen, and then they switched to the camera inside the security office. The video showed the manager sitting exactly where he was now, with Donnie coming into the office, staring at the screens. But then, that's when they saw the boy walk in behind them. He stepped up beside them and just stared at them. And just as they were about to stop the video, something else moved on screen. A shape, a shadow, it appeared behind both of them. My friend Donnie didn't stay much longer after that night. He ended up quitting a few days later, and that's when he told me the story. But what about the HR manager? Well, he ended up transferring out not too long after, because no matter how new the school is, or how many times you paint the walls, some things never leave, not if they belong to the land. And the land itself, it never forgets. In all seriousness, my friend Donnie wouldn't make any of this up. Like I said, you used to hear stories about the school before it was remodeled, but recently, there's been stories starting to come back up again. I dare you to ask anybody who's a teacher at Pahintsinteo, Iowa, on the Pine Ridge REZ. About a year ago, I moved my family and I to a home way out in the woods in Tennessee. I wanted to be brief here, but I need to get this off my chest. And after looking into this a little bit more, I have a lot more details that I think will paint a clearer picture in the end, so just bear with me. The nights here can be very loud. Between the crickets, the tree frogs, and everything else in between, it can be deafening. One night, not too long after we moved in, I had forgotten something in my car and headed outside to go get it. The first thing that struck me as odd was that my dog wouldn't go outside with me. My dog goes everywhere with me. But not this night. As I held the door open, she looked out then looked up at me like no. So I walked out and shut the door behind me. The second thing that caught me off guard was that there was not a peep. It was dead silent. I still shrugged this off and walked down my front steps and headed down to my car. When I had gotten about 10 feet from my car, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt as though something was watching me. I looked around but saw nothing. After I reached into my vehicle for what I had forgotten to grab earlier, I had this feeling like something was moving towards me. I took a step back and I checked around me. All of a sudden, I heard one of my hedges next to me that lined the walkway to our front door rattle. At first, I thought it was a rabbit that I had scared, as I had seen one just earlier in the day right where this was. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of a large rock landing a few feet away from me. It hit the walkway and bounced into a shrub. I drew my gun and called out and said whoever this was is about to get shot. After a few seconds of nothing, I began to think that maybe this was some local teenager messing with the new people. I holstered my gun and turned and started walking back to the front door. Almost as soon as I turned towards my house, I heard this deep sound. It sounded like a huge dog, but what made me know back to my front door was that it sounded like it was right behind me. I leaped up into my porch, turned and drew my firearm again, expecting something right there. But again, there was nothing. A couple weeks later, I was on my porch at night, sitting on a bench with my wife. She got up and walked inside to get something, and as soon as she shut the door,
I heard that same sound again. I couldn't see anything, yet this sounded like it was right on top of me. The sound was coming from everywhere, and it was very loud. Again, I couldn't see anything, so I noped it back inside of my house. Now at this point I was questioning moving here, but after nothing else really happening, I let it all go. A month or so later, it was a really rainy and stormy night. This is around 9 p.m., and my wife and I enjoy listening to the rain and talking about how relaxing the rain is. I grew up in Oregon, so I love the rain. And for the past 10 years, we lived somewhere else where it would dump the entire year of rain in one single day, then be bone dry for the rest of the year. Now for my wife, the rain was such a rare thing. She loved going outside and watching the rain. So for us, this is an enjoyable experience. As we were sitting there talking about the rain and relaxing, my wife stops and says, "Did you hear that?" And I said, no. What did you hear?" I swear it sounded like a small child calling for help out in the woods beside our house. She said, "No, I didn't hear anything." After a few moments of us listening, she was like, "There it is. I didn't hear anything, sweetie. Are you sure you're not just hearing things?" She looked at me offended that I didn't hear anything and said, "No, I'm positive. How could you not hear that? It was our son. I think he's out there and got lost." We then both looked through the blinds that were open right behind us, and we could see all of our children laying there. She said it was so weird that it sounded like our son. Well, it's not him. He's right there. Besides, I don't hear anything. She then stands up and says, "Wow, he's really crying out for help. I need to go look for him." Now at this point, if you knew my wife, you would know that she is absolutely creeped out by the woods and wouldn't be caught dead walking into them during daylight, much less at night during a storm. I grabbed her hand and said, "I've been listening, and there's nobody calling out for help." At this point, I'm getting a little bit worried. She was acting completely out of character, not to mention that at this time she is 8 months pregnant with our baby daughter. She then says, "What if there's some child out there lost?" Well, first of all, I would be able to hear them as well. Second, there are no other kids around here for miles, and the odds of them being lost 100 feet from our house is not possible. She then says, "I know, but what if it's a kid?" Before I could say anything else, she stands up and starts walking towards the stairs. I jumped up and grabbed her hand again and said, "I don't know what's going on, but you need to go inside." I didn't know what this was, but it freaked me out. A few months after this, just as it was getting dark outside, I heard the front door to our house open and I got up to investigate. We have autistic 6-year-old twins, and we have the door set up so that they can't open it without us there. So to hear the sound, it could only be my wife. What was more weird is the fact that she doesn't go outside without saying something to me. I walked out front and saw my wife walking down our private road towards the drive on the side of our house. I asked her what she's doing, and she said that she was sitting on the back patio and kept hearing a baby crying out in the woods. "Are you serious? And you just decided to walk off into the woods to investigate?" I said. She then looks out into the woods and says, "See, there it is again." I couldn't hear anything, but what I did notice is that it was completely quiet outside again. I told her just like before, the chances of a baby being out in the woods outside our house is slim, and that she needed to get back in the house. She then said, "What if someone left a baby out there?" Well, if that was true, I would hear it as well. Now at this point I was really starting to worry about my wife's mental health. I asked her to see a psychiatrist, and she did. Looking back now, I feel really bad about this, knowing what I know now. A key to this moment was that my wife had just given birth to a baby girl a month before. A few days after this, we're out on the front porch again. It's early evening, and I had just cut the grass this day, and our 3-year-old son was riding around on his little car in front of the house. Now he knows that he's not allowed outside of a certain area that we mapped off. He loves playing outside, but with the road behind 50 feet from our front porch, we have to be careful as a lot of trucks will fly through after drinking all day on their boats. As we're talking, We're both keeping an eye on him. A neighbor then drives by and stops to say hi for a second. This interaction took about 8 seconds, as all they said was how are things, and we said we're good, and he told us he would stop by later as his wife got something for the kids, who happens to be one of their teachers in school. We simply say okay, and he drives off. I looked over where our son was at, and he was gone. I called out his name and ran over to the side of the house, and I could hear his car on our side drive. I scolded him for leaving the area, and he said something in his 3-year-old gibberish and pointed to the woods behind our house. I then told him that he had 5 seconds to get back up to the front of the house or else. He then pointed back in the direction of the woods and kept trying to tell me something. I looked off to where he was pointing at and just assumed that he saw a deer or a squirrel or something and he wanted to see it up close. I walked him back up to the front of the house and he cried the whole way there. He got really upset that I wouldn't let him go into the woods, but I just wrote this off as him being curious, as most 3-year-old boys are. Now this situation isn't isolated, as our twins have done similar things, but nothing very extreme like this. There have been nights where we just laid down for the night, and we heard a loud bang on the side of our house on the wall behind our bed. It was so loud that I jumped up and looked out the window. Our floodlight had come on, but I couldn't see anything. Now the weird part about this is that our bedroom sits about 12 feet from the ground level, as we have a full-size basement that's cinder block. I put on my slippers and grabbed my shotgun and walked outside to investigate. It was dead silent again. The floodlight that's on the side of the house had clicked off at this point, so I walked over to the end of the deck and shined my light around the yard. There was nothing. I walked around the house and shined the light around intently. As I approached the back side of my house, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Again, it felt like someone was watching me. I shined the light up in the trees, but again, nothing. I rounded the corner and the first thing I noticed was that my 3 dogs that were in their area weren't making a single sound. Now our dogs have no filter and will bark at anyone and everyone. This includes me as well. So to see them all hiding with their tails between their legs, not making a single sound, really had me worried. As I kept walking, all of a sudden, the crickets and frogs started making sounds again. It was like someone had clicked a switch. I walked back into the house and told my wife that I hadn't seen anything. She shrugged and said okay as long as our dogs were okay. Due to the circumstances that night, I decided to let the dogs in and sleep with us. This very same thing has happened on all 4 exterior walls of our house. It's random and annoying, but just like this instance, every time there's nothing going on outside. There have also been times when we're sitting in the house, and as I was watching a movie, my wife walked over to me and said, "Did you call me?" I say no, and she says that she heard me call her name in her ear. She said it was definitely my voice, but she didn't understand because it sounded so close, and I was a good 20 feet away from her in my recliner. The important part to this was that she was sitting at the table doing something, and the slider to the backyard was open behind her. Now, our back patio sits about 20 feet off the ground, and it's like a balcony as it has no stair access outside. There have been several instances where she would say that she heard someone whisper in her ear, but she couldn't make out the sound. Again, I kept thinking that she was going crazy, but as you will see, I think all of this is tied into this final moment where things are revealed. The last thing I want to mention before we get into what just happened is that I have a shooting range built behind my workshop on the opposite side of our property next to the main road. It's kind of on a downslope, but it works perfectly for what I need it for. The range itself is cut straight into the woods going down about 100 yards or so. When you're at the downrange, you have woods surrounding you on all sides except back up to my shop. I have to say, it has always felt creepy when I'm dealing with my targets or mowing the grass. When you're down there, it feels like you're miles from anyone. One day, around 5 in the evening, I was sighting in a new rifle scope. The sun was still up, but it was going to start to fade soon, so I knew this was going to be the final test. Up until this point, nothing really happened while I was making my trips down range. other than the feeling of uneasiness. As I got downrange, I kept getting this feeling like someone or something was watching me. I looked around but didn't see anything. As I was placing stickers over my previous shots, I heard something big off to the side of me. It sounded like a large branch had snapped off of a tree. Now, if you've been in the Tennessee woods, you will know that a lot of branches fall off the trees randomly out of nowhere. Except this time, it was very loud and sounded like fresh, strong wood, if that makes any sense. I turned and looked, but again I couldn't see anything. I started walking back up to my rifle, and I swear, I heard someone right behind me. I turned around, but again, saw nothing. As I started to walk again, that's when I heard it, a deep growling noise. It was really deep and loud, and what's worse is that it was all around me. I turned around facing the range and started walking backwards. The thought of some rabid dog charging out of the bushes had me freaked out, so running wasn't a good idea. I slowly walked backwards up the hill to my rifle, but nothing happened. I grabbed my rifle and sprayed the target with rapid fire, hoping to scare off whatever was stalking me. I left 10 rounds in the mag, then grabbed my rifle bag, and I quickly walked back up to the house. I never told my wife about this, as I didn't want to freak her out. So about a year later from when we moved in, my niece started staying with us as a live-in nanny to earn money over summer break from college. We were on our way back from the store, and about a mile from our house, I saw 2 eyes reflecting in the headlights coming from a white tree on the side of the road just ahead. It caught my attention because they were higher than a deer, but a different color and size. Just as I had said, "What is that?" and squinted, they had vanished. I had made a comment that it was almost as if they had known I could see its eyes and moved. The color was kind of golden green, but they resembled the mannerism of a large cat, as they felt ominous. It's hard to explain, but I shrugged it off as we were passing the tree and saw nothing. A few moments later, we arrived at the house. As we were getting bags out of the car, my 3-year-old son came running out of the house excited to see me. As I was waiting to help her carry in her bags, I heard my dog growl. I looked in the direction she was looking at, which was towards my neighbor's property across the street. What I saw has kept me up all night. Up until this point, I have always been skeptical, as I had never seen anything with my own 2 eyes. Even with what just happened to me the year prior, I still had my doubts that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. My street is kind of a spread out neighborhood. Each house sits on several acres, and at the end of our road is Kentucky Lake. My neighbor's house is adjacent to my house on about an acre or 2 lot. Directly in front of my house is a wall of woods, and directly behind my house is several thousand acres of untouched forest. As I was looking across the street to my neighbor's property, I saw a large dark figure between the trees at first. The movement caught me off guard, as it looked like something big moving quickly on all 4s. Then, when it came out into clear view, it stood up and walked like a man. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. It was very tall, but the strange thing about it was that the distance it was covering, I swear, I could see through it. It was clearly walking quickly, but moving faster than any person could even sprint. There was also no sound. It was like it was phasing in and out of reality as it moved. I then said, "What the hell is that?" and realized that it was looking directly at us. It had moved at an angle away from us to minimize the time out in the open, and moving quickly as it could while still being silent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I realized that whatever it was stalking us. I told my niece to get in the house right now, and I grabbed my son and booked it inside. I grabbed my rifle with a short scope and came back outside to see my niece still grabbing stuff out of her car. I watched over her without saying a word. As she was slowly walking, she turned towards the woods across the street from my house, and suddenly bolted for the house. She ran up the steps in a panicked state. I asked her what she saw, and her face was pale as a ghost. She then said, "I heard something big in the woods walking loud on the leaves, and when I turned towards it, I heard a deep guttural growl. I asked her why she didn't come when I told her, and she said she thought I was talking to my son. I told her what I had seen, and she wanted to get a closer look to see if she could see something. As she was walking down the walkway, I heard the sound of dry leaves crunching in the woods across the street. She's about 6 feet away from my wife's SUV. As she turned and started walking back to me, I caught a glimpse of something gray and hairy move from behind the SUV back across the street into the woods. My porch is kinda elevated, and our SUV is about 6 feet tall, and whatever this was, it cleared about 45 feet in what looked to be a single jump. It moved like lightning. Whatever it was, it wanted my niece. It jumped behind the car out of my line of sight and was waiting for her. She still doubted my warnings and grabbed a flashlight and walked back towards the car. As she entered my driveway, she stopped dead in her tracks, leaned a little bit, as if she could see something. I asked her what she saw. That's when she turned and ran back up the porch with a terrified look on her face. She said it was a figure, a shadow, hiding inside of a tree, and that she saw its eyes. I asked her what they looked like, and all she could say was that they looked red at first, but as she got closer, they looked dead. I said, "What do you mean by dead?" And she said that where the pupils were, it looked gray, like the way eyes look when they go blind, and she swears that she could see through it, almost like a dark cloud. She wanted to go out again and took a step down the stairs, and as she did, that's when it revealed itself from the tree. I then said to get inside, and I went in and locked the door. It looked like a very tall human-shaped being. It was really tall, and it looked ominous as hell. The next morning, we did a height comparison to the tree limb where she saw it stand over, and we put it to around 9 feet tall, and its eyes were about 6 inches apart. At this point, I don't know what this thing was. After doing some research, I think this thing was a glimmer man, a crawler. I looked to see if there had been any other sightings in Benson County, but nothing. More important, I swear it would face in and out, almost like a shadow person, but bigger and more obvious. One of the weirdest things that I have came up with is that this thing can communicate without saying anything. This might explain why everyone was hearing something that nobody else could hear. Second, it has a playback-like communication. So when I heard a dog panting, it was most likely one of my dogs it heard. My wife was actually hearing our son crying for help, as he had recently fell and cried for help as well. The baby crying would be our newborn baby, who she had given birth to recently, and it must have heard me call my wife's name, and so maybe that's how it was calling my wife's name with my voice. Another thing that my niece had said that night was that she felt compelled to go back outside to it. She said she felt like this thing was communicating with her somehow, and it wanted her to go back outside. The more I read about this, the more everything that's been happening over the past year makes sense. One thing that I find extra convincing is that down the road, towards the lake, there's a property that is barbed wired off, and it's nothing but forest with no driveway. A lot of the property down our road is undeveloped land, and on one of the trees, there is this large old sign that says, "Screamer lives here," with an arrow pointing back into the woods. I have to admit, when I first saw this sign, I laughed thinking maybe the owner screamed at trespassers who enter his property, and teenagers put up the sign to mess with him. But when I did a satellite search of our neighborhood, that entire section of road has no houses or trails or anything, and it's just pure forest. Now that you understand my story, I doubt this is the ending. The next question is, what can we do? I don't want my wife or kids to disappear one day. I feel perplexed and scared, as what can I do? If you have any advice, let me know. Update 1. Thank you all for the support. We're overwhelmed with the number of responses that we have had. Unfortunately, we can't afford to get a camera system or the trail cameras that many have recommended. I'm a disabled veteran, and had just lost my business to the COVID lockdowns and were struggling a little bit. That being said, I did go out soon after posting at night to try and get some evidence to bring here for you. The camera on my phone is not great for nighttime, and it seems to make the images very grainy with the low light. As I was sitting there that night, I did catch some strange sounds on the camera, as well as when I passed an area with my flashlight, there appeared to be something. But when I came back to it, there was nothing. Again, due to the light, it's very hard to make out. I haven't felt comfortable going out since then. My niece just came back from a week's vacation in Florida, so we're planning to sit out there a couple of nights to see if we can get anything. This stuff has been happening for some time now, but it was random and far apart. Ever since this last incident, I have seen things that I can't even explain, but they seem to be happening almost on a daily basis now. Last night, when my niece arrived, we went out on the front porch to welcome her. I did notice something that looked like a face that was staring at me, but what is weird, as I was staring at it, it moved back into the shadow without moving, if that even makes any sense. These are the things I really want to get on here for you. There is a story of a man in Georgia who I believe saw the exact same thing I did that night, and if I find it, I'll post a link for you as well. We're also going to be working with an artist to try and get a good picture to show exactly what we saw that night. I really want to keep everyone updated on the things going on. There have been many other things that have happened here that I would also like to add. I know that they may not be connected, but I feel like you all should be the judge of that. The one thing that I do want to add in this update that I didn't think was connected was about 2-3 weeks ago. My wife and I had an argument about something silly. She decided to walk back into our woods to clear her mind. I was on the back patio when I noticed her walking down our shooting range. I asked her where she was going, and she said, to cool off. I know the chances of something happening to her was slim, but I did find it strange that she would choose to go into the woods rather than simply walking down the road. I quickly got dressed and went down to try and bring her back. I went to the end of the range and called out her name. After a few minutes of calling out, I heard nothing. Not a single sound, not a twig, or anything. Now the weird part is that it's impossible to move around these woods without making a sound, especially for her. I was worried that she was walking too far, but I had to get back into the house as our children were alone. It freaked me out because it was as if she had just vanished. I went back in the house and debated calling someone, but I figured I would give her a little more time. I went to the back patio and waited. After about an hour, I started to get really worried. I called out her name again and decided that I would call if she hadn't returned in about 30 minutes. After another 20 minutes went by, she came walking back out of the woods. Angry that she had worried me so much, yet also relieved, I asked her what she was thinking, and she said, "What are you talking about?" As she walked back up into the house, she came and looked at me like I was crazy. I said, "Did you not hear me calling out to you?" She said she only heard me once and that she replied. Now, this is where it gets crazy. She said, "I only been gone for about 10 to 15 minutes. Why are you freaking out?" When I told her that she had been gone for an hour and 20 minutes, she didn't believe me. She also said that when she went down there, she didn't go very far, but when she turned around, she started walking and got worried that she was lost. She said she didn't recognize where she was, but something told her to keep walking. She said it felt strange and that the air felt different. When she came back out of the woods, she was relieved to see the house. Now the part that upsets me the most about this was that where she said she was is impossible. I was literally just standing 20 feet away from that spot. If she really was there, not only would I have seen her, but she could have talked to me in a normal voice. More concerning is that you can see the house from this spot, and how she felt lost. It's just crazy. I don't know what this was. I thought that again, that she was just losing her mind. After reading some responses, I feel like what happened to her was real. I do plan to go back to that spot with her. to prove that you can see the house from there, but I want her to show me exactly where all she went. I know some people are thinking that we're crazy, but I promise that I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get proof and keep you updated as we figure this stuff out. I know it's turning into a book to read, but I want to be detailed as possible. Let me know if you want me to keep posting the updates here like this. I'm gonna try to keep a weekly update for you all. Update 2, June 24, 2022. Weird things keep happening. Today, my 3-year-old son is playing on the back patio a few feet away from us, and all of a sudden, the dogs inside jump and start barking as one of our dogs that's on the patio with him comes bolting into the door. I jump up to see what's going on, and my son is pointing at the tree line saying, "Werewolf, Daddy, werewolf." Now my son loves watching videos of werewolves for children for some reason. I would normally put this off as nothing, but if you saw the look in his face, you would know that he was serious. Plus, with the way my dogs reacted, he had to have seen something. I pulled out my phone and began recording. He kept saying, "Daddy, look, werewolf in the bushes." I tell him I can't see anything, but I can hear something really big in the leaves. I'm gonna post a recording of this whole thing to see if any of you all can see anything that I might have missed. Update 3, July 9, 2022. Alright, I meant to keep everyone updated up until now. I have just had a lot on my plate. My niece has quit. She says she can't handle all the stuff that's been happening to her. Everything was fine for a while. We kept indoors for the most part. We went out on the porch one night with a flashlight and camera hoping to catch something. We kept hearing things in the brush. After a while of not seeing anything, we went back inside. I said my prayers, then slept like a baby. My niece, however, did not. She woke up late the next day and seemed a bit jumpy. I then asked her, "What's wrong?" She said that she didn't sleep well as something was outside her window. It took some time to get her to talk about it. She said she could hear something big outside her window, but every time she looked, she couldn't see anything. She said she heard weird noises that she couldn't describe. She came out in the living room to see if I was still up, but I was fast asleep. She then decided to go back to her room and go to sleep watching YouTube on her phone. She said that she was almost asleep when she felt something standing right behind her. She turned around and said there was nothing. She said she kept having the feeling but brushed it off as her imagination. That was until about 3 a.m. when she woke up. She had the same feeling as before, but this time it was very intense. Like whatever it was, it wanted to devour her. She turned around quickly and saw what looked like a shadow disappear into the wall in the blink of an eye. She told me this kept happening until she passed out late in the morning. I told her it was weird as we have never experienced anything like that in the house before. We have had weird things happen, like things disappear for a while. Then they reappear days or months later in the exact same spot they last were. She said it felt like whatever this was, it made her feel like it wanted to cause pain. I told her to keep me updated and to let me know if anything else happens. A few days later, she then asked if she can use the hot tub that's out back. I explained that it's off as we can't afford to heat it up. When we get over to it, I open it to look inside. To my disbelief, not only is it on, but the water looks great, minus a little cleanup that needed to be done. As I'm walking around, all of a sudden, I hear this really loud sound behind me, almost like a log falling onto the ground, or a really big boulder hitting the ground. Imagine an engine block falling 20 feet onto soft soil. It made me jump. I turned around but couldn't see anything as the brush was too thick. I kept helping her work on the spa. Then she says that she's gonna go inside and get changed so she can get in. I look around and realize that it's getting dark outside and I really don't want to be out here. I bend over to work on getting the filter cleaned out. and I hear what sounds like something big snapping branches and charging at me. It made me jump and run to the back door. I turned around to see what it was, and it was nothing. I walk back into the house and walk upstairs. I tell her that I heard something out there, and she looked at me for a minute, then said, "Well, I want to get in and relax." She then asked if I can leave the back patio door open so if she needs me, she can call. But according to her, she enjoyed the spa without incident. However, every day I noticed her getting more anxious and less willing to talk about it. She says every night something new happens to her, but when I ask her to explain, she always refuses. A few nights later, I walk out on the porch and notice it's dead quiet again. I ask her to come out on the porch with me, but she says that she's tired and wants to call her boyfriend and go to bed. My wife gets up early and takes care of the kids, and it's my job to handle night shift, so she's in bed at this point. I decide that I don't have the guts to do this alone, so I put on a movie and relax in my recliner. I end up falling asleep, then wake up at around 3 a.m. to a noise coming from my niece's room. It sounds like a very deep voice. I knock on the door. I call out several times, but get nothing in response. I figure it must be her video and decided to let it be. I head to bed, and just as I start to pass out, another loud bang happens. I wake up and hear what sounds like something skittering on the wall outside of my bedroom. I understand that this is way up in the air and physically impossible. I look out the window, but I don't see anything. After going out and checking on this noise a few times over the last year and finding nothing, I decided to forget it and just go back to sleep. The next day, my niece comes out and tells me that she had the shadow thing happen again. Except this time, she left her light on. She said she woke up to getting that feeling again. She said that when she opened her eyes, she could see an extremely tall shadow figure standing over the top of her. She said it was moving closer, and just as she started to see the details of its face, she turned around in a panic, but nothing was there. She said the eyes haunted her but didn't want to elaborate any further. The next morning, for the first time ever, my niece is up bright and early. I noticed that she looked anxious as she told me that she is headed home for the 4th of July weekend and will be back on Tuesday. I ask her if she is okay, and she just says yes and quickly walks out the door. Later that day, I get a call from my sister telling me that she won't be coming back. I ask her if everything is alright, and she says that she just wants to enjoy the rest of her summer. A little while later, I get a call from my niece telling me that she doesn't want to work here anymore, and she can't handle the emotions of whatever is out there. She doesn't explain more than that. I checked on her room, and I noticed that she's been sleeping with one of the windows wide open. This window is perfectly accessible from the outside. I don't know what's been going on with her, but whatever it is, it looks like it could have been coming in the room. Anyways, jumping to the 4th of July, I do fireworks in front of our property by the road facing the woods. Due to what's been happening at night, I decide to do all this prior to it getting dark outside. We do our fireworks, and just as it starts to get dark, I get everyone inside. After a couple of hours, I remember that my hose is still on the ground and laying out by the road. I head out to clean everything up, and I put the hose away. While I'm doing this, that's when I noticed that it's dead silent again, minus the sound of fireworks in the distance. The hairs on the back of my neck go up, and I get the feeling that I'm being watched again. I hurry and fix the hose and ran back to the house. I swear, I'm starting to wonder if it's just my mind playing tricks on me at this point. Update 4, January 2024. We're still here, and most of it has stopped. I have learned after an exhausting amount of research that yes, these things are very real. But they're not what most of us think they are. They're not our friends, and will never be. They have a hatred towards us, and are amazing at long cons and will trick you. You can absolutely draw them to you, but they can seek you out as well. I could really go into detail, but it's probably best that I don't do it. You have to rewire your thinking completely in order to understand what's actually happening. I am going to give advice to anyone if this stuff is happening to them and they want it to stop. If you saw something, you didn't. Don't look into the woods here at dusk or at night, because if you're looking for them, you will find them. I will definitely start by praying. Pray over your family, your land, and also try it when things start to get scary to see if it stops. Sometimes it can be simple as that. Many times, despite whatever it is, it seems to work. It might stick around in the woods, but hopefully you can keep it off your property. Kids can see things that we can't. For some reason, we lose this ability as we get older. I would sit the whole family down and have a serious conversation about what's going on, just to be straight up about the woods being dangerous and whatnot. And make sure to tell everybody to not listen to anyone who's calling them into the woods, that it will never be you or anybody else. Tell your kids to let you know as soon as they see something, so you can protect them. Then cast it out with prayer. My neighbors actually came to help me because things were getting so out of control for everyone. So this is why I don't post anymore or talk about these things again. Slowly, all of my neighbors have seen things. Apparently, there's rules to living in Tennessee that most locals know about but don't share. Rules like don't whistle at night. If you hear your name being called from the woods, no you didn't. You didn't hear anything. If you hear some crying or anything while the woods are still, you didn't. You never talk about it. Otherwise, your acknowledgement may bring it closer. This will be my last update. Stay safe out there.
My family has a hunting cabin in the National Forest of Pennsylvania. My grandpa, who worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh, bought the land in the 70s whenever the agents used to go into the mills and post ads for huge plots of land that the steel workers would break up and all get their own plots for dirt cheap, then help each other build their own camps. Allegedly, there was a gravesite found on the property that my grandpa bought. The details aren't exactly known how this was discovered, but apparently some type of survey was done before the property was sold. An archaeologist from the University of Pittsburgh uncovered a very old Native American grave. They excavated the grave, but the pit, by that point now just a depression in the ground, was still there. This was on my grandpa's property about 200 yards from the cabin. Of course, I don't know if any of this is true, but the depression was, and as far as I know, it's still there. And that was the story that we were all told. Of course, when I was a kid, my cousins and I used to do very dumb and stupid things, like go back to the site in the middle of the night, and we would dare each other to lay down on it. I must have been around 10 when this happened, back in the early 90s. My dad swears he doesn't remember it, but my cousin remembers it, as we still keep in touch. So we were sitting around the campfire, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows and talking, that type of stuff. Obviously there was no alcohol on my part, as I was around 10, and my dad didn't drink. I remember my dad telling everybody to be quiet, and my older cousins and my dad were talking about seeing somebody in the woods. My dad then shines a flashlight into the woods. We don't see anybody. We go back to business, and one of my cousins actually shouts, "There he is again." By shielding the light from the fire, you can see a wispy, grayish human figure walking through the woods slowly, like he's not trying to make any noise. He was walking from our left, as if he came from behind the cabin and was crossing the wood line along our left, and then across the front of the yard just along the trees, about 50 yards or so from us, taking a wide turn to avoid us. Nobody said a word.
My dad and one of my cousins both shined flashlights several times, but he would disappear. You could only see him in the dark, and after your eyes were adjusted. At some point he walked in the field of view, where the fire was between us and him, and that was it. We never saw him again. One of the creepiest things out of all this is that he was walking towards the gravesite. We had never seen this before, and we never saw it again. I spent about a week every summer at the camp, until I was about 20. Family drama, weirdness. After my grandpa died, kind of ruined the camp for us, and I haven't been back since then. Needless to say, we didn't mess with that grave, or any grave, again. After reading a few discussions on here, I decided to add one of the creepier, still unexplained events that happened to me, and to a group of friends within the past 5 years. Thinking back on it, I still get this unnerved bad feeling that just sort of lingers. Anyways, here it goes. A group of friends and myself rented a place on the lake for just a fun-filled drunken weekend. We were all in our young to mid-20s, and it was supposed to be just a big party. For the most part, that's what it was. The Friday night and Saturday morning we pretty much went all out having a blast on the water and just doing fun, stupid stuff. Well, naturally, when Saturday afternoon rolled around, we were all so dead from going all out that we decided it would be a night of no drinking. Maybe a little weed smoking by some of us, and just kind of having a chill evening at night. That's what it was, relaxful. So 9 p.m. comes rolling around, and about 8 of us were inside the house, and 5 of us were outside. The house was a 2-story with a 2nd-story deck back porch, and it was surrounded by the woods, and then down through the woods you would hit the lake. I'll mention that we had already experienced some weird things from the locals when we arrived in town, mostly just backcountry old-timers that I assume were irritated because we were a bunch of college-age kids looking to have a good time. But the town and the lake are big, so it's not like anyone knew where we were staying at. Anyways, 3 of my friends were on the upstairs back porch, and my other friend and I were downstairs outside just talking on this little old table near the woods. I mean, it was otherwise just a really nice night. My friend and I were just getting lost in the conversation, and all of a sudden, there was this weird feeling, like an unnerving experience that came from the woods behind us. It was so strong that we both kind of quieted down, and then, out of nowhere, there was this loud chanting coming from deep within the woods. I have no idea how far away it was because of the way the lake is set up. I'm pretty sure the voices were carried up through the forest. It was so strong we both kind of quieted down, and then, out of nowhere, there were these loud voices coming from the woods. It sounded like some kind of secret cult, just chanting away, and all of the voices were male. I mean, they were loud and perfectly in sync. I think we were frozen for all about 20 seconds before I couldn't contain myself and ran towards the house with my friend following me. I don't know how to explain the feeling that came with that chanting, but it felt very evil, like something so uninviting. I was shaking by the time we got up to the 2nd story and ran out on the balcony with the other 3 friends, one of them who was my brother. By the time we got up there, the chanting was gone, and I naturally asked, "Did you guys hear that?" They had also heard the voices, and now seconds later, it began again. So the 5 of us are out there peering into the forest, listening to this chanting that would sometimes sound far away, and then sound very close. They were all male voices in the weirdest language, and I don't even know what it was. It sounded almost like a strange extreme church. Then following the chanting, a loud bang like someone hit a huge metal object sounded, and then the worst part came. A man, screaming, in extreme pain, crying and screaming. All of my hair was up at this point. It was the scariest thing ever. My brother and I were staring at each other. The screaming stopped, and then it was back to the chanting, which eventually died out. I was so freaked out by it that I wanted to call the police, because it sounded like whoever screamed was in a lot of pain. That mixed with the weird chanting just made me immediately think of some terrible sacrifice going on. One friend tried to say that it must have been some drunk guys just messing around singing and being weird, but there is no way that was coming from some drunk guys. They were perfectly in sync, and then the loud screaming of pain. I didn't call the cops and I wish I would have, but to be honest, the forest is so big, and since the lake house was up looking down at the woods and lake, it could have been anywhere. It definitely wasn't close to us, but it was close enough to hear all of that perfectly. We went in and got some of the others, but by the time they came out, everything had stopped. Someone actually wanted to go explore and find where it had been coming from, but obviously, that was a stupid idea. After that, I was so ready to go home. I can't explain the relief of driving away from there the next morning. Even now, I just get the worst feeling that whatever it was, it felt so wrong and evil. I'll never forget that moment. I can only imagine it was some sort of secret cult that possibly sacrifices humans.
I never really knew my grandma's brother well. All I can remember is that he was a real energetic man who lived on the hill where my grandparents resided, in the Navajo REZ, not far from the Chaco Wash. My grandma's brother used to reside a couple of miles north of my grandparents' place. His dwelling, more like a shack, sat on the outskirts of the Badlands. When we were young, we were instructed to steer clear of this place because it was considered evil. I never questioned why. I just accepted the warning and avoided the area. As time went by, my grandma's brother passed away under strange circumstances. He was found dead in his house. Even though he would occasionally visit my grandparents, his absence for a few days was unusual. My older uncle went to his house and discovered his lifeless body. What was strange was the hasty funeral arrangements that followed. Normally, in Navajo tradition, funerals are held on the fourth day after the person's passing, but in this case, the funeral was conducted immediately, without even informing the family. Curiosity led me to sneak over to his house to see what it looked like inside before it was torn down, as per my grandmother's request. The inside of the house felt eerie. It was a one-room, shed-like structure with faded and some bleached wooden boards for walls. The boards didn't fit tightly, allowing sunlight to filter in, illuminating the floating dust particles. The bed was modest, adorned with a green army blanket. There weren't that many decorations, mostly old shearing tools and knives, with no photographs in sight. An old wood stove and a small table occupied the space, alongside two crates at the far end of the room. One wooden crate laid open, revealing its contents, while the other, made of metal, was locked. After my brief exploration, I left the house, noting its vantage point, overlooking the Badlands to the west. Several years passed, and my older uncle decided to build his dream house on the exact site where my grandmother's brother had lived. Despite my grandmother's concerns about the location, my uncle was determined to proceed with the construction. He envisioned a single-story ranch-style house, equipped with all modern stuff, which was actually very rare on the REZ. The construction began, and everything seemed to progress easy at first. However, strange occurrences soon began to fall on the workers. Tools would go missing, and they said that there would be shadows moving within the house, and blood was discovered smeared on the walls. Even stranger were the tracks found in the sand around the house, leading from the west towards the Badlands. My uncle, an experienced hunter, couldn't identify these tracks, so he looked for help with my grandpa, who also found them perplexing. Eventually, my grandma intervened Recognizing the signs of a skinwalker, she instructed my uncle on the necessary precautions, and work on the house stopped until this issue could be resolved. Despite being careful, strange events continued to happen in the house, but my uncle pressed on. He eventually completed the house, and even yet, the disturbances persisted, driving his family to discomfort and fear. Even my grandmother's attempts to calm the spirits seemed futile against whatever forces were at play. On one specific evening, my cousins and I stayed over, and we experienced firsthand the strange nature of this house. The generator was shut off, and then strange noises echoed through the darkness, and it almost felt like some presence seemed to stalk us from the shadows. Only the intervention of my grandparents, armed with traditional remedies and fierce determination, brought us relief from all of this. Another incident involved my younger cousin. She was alone in the truck outside, and she said as she looked to the west side of the house, she saw a pale, humanoid figure peering down at her with dark, soulless eyes. Her screaming alerted the family to come outside, but this creature had vanished before they could confront it. Even with my grandmother, a woman of great strength, she had vowed to confront whatever was there and expel it from the house. My grandma was very traditional and practiced native medicine. She also used sacred crystals to find and heal people. While looking into her crystals, she would also practice reading people's hands. There's been a few instances where she has been used to locate missing people and also found the circumstances of the way the person died. She also had knowledge of the evil way, the dark practice of witchcraft. In native medicine, my grandma had acquired a few secret items and would seek help from another medicine man. They both went into the house and began a ceremony to expel whatever was in it. They went into each room, blessing them with sage and sealing them with ash. When they finally went into the master bedroom, the medicine man started to vomit and bleed from the nose. My grandma said that she had a nauseous feeling and felt dizzy, almost fainting. They both retreated from the room and closed the door, sealing it with ash. The medicine man said the room was the source of evil, attracting evil spirits, including skinwalkers. He said he would try to pinpoint where the evil was coming from, but would need to go in alone. He began by lighting up a medicine bundle, taking bitter root, and marking his forehead with ash before entering the room. He described the room as very cold, feeling the presence of numerous spirits in the closet. Upon opening the closet, he saw a black mist on the floor, swirling like the eye of a black hurricane. He began the ceremony to close the portal, but was met with resistance. The medicine man heard a voice from the swirling mass, telling him that only the one who summoned the evil could close the portal. However, he continued the ceremony, and the mass started to diminish and eventually disappeared. Blessing the room with sage and corn pollen, he attached the burnt log to the top of the interior of the closet and sealed the door with ash. He warned my grandma that whatever was summoned was evil and too strong to keep under control, and so his recommendation was that my uncle abandon the house. Despite the warnings, my aunt, her boyfriend, and their 3-year-old son moved into the house, believing it to be a perfectly good place to save money on rent payments. However, they soon encountered paranormal experiences. One evening, my aunt heard footsteps walking down the hallway, followed by something crawling into bed with her and her son. Whatever it was, quickly got out of bed, threw off the covers, and stepped on her boyfriend's neck, causing him to choke for air. They then decided to leave the house immediately, leaving their belongings behind. Later, my younger uncle Max and his friend Leo decided to spend the night at the house to investigate. While they were there, They experienced a terrifying encounter with different spirits, including that of a little girl and a faceless figure, making them flee the house in fear. Even after these encounters, the house has remained vacant, with strange occurrences continuing to happen, such as lights turning on despite the lack of electricity. Despite the warnings and strange events, the house stands abandoned, with its curtains drawing open, as if someone is still inside, watching.
I live in the downtown area of a major Texas city. To get away from the city and enjoy the outdoors and some alone time, I would make the hour-and-a-half drive almost every weekend to a small cabin that's in the woods owned by my family. I've been hanging out at that cabin in those woods almost my entire life, so I feel pretty comfortable there. The area doesn't have many people living there, and it's always safe. So one weekend, I took some of my friends out there to fish and spend some time away from the city. While fishing on the bank of the river that runs near my folks' cabin, we pulled up some chairs, started a fire, drank a few beers, and watched the sun go down behind the trees. That is life. After sitting around for a few hours, I suggested we go hunting the next morning for breakfast. The guys weren't big fans of waking up early to crawl around in the woods looking for something to eat. They would have rather stayed up all night drinking and fishing and wake up late the next day. "Let's just go hunting right now," said one of them. Everyone else agreed and started getting loud. I stayed put in my chair and replied, "Hell no, it's too late. It's too dark. We wouldn't be able to see a thing out there, man. Plus, there's those dang witches." Everyone knew I made a good point, but then one of them said, "Wait, what do you mean by witches? What are witches anyway? Like, seriously?" I laughed a bit because they all seemed so intrigued, and all of a sudden so focused. So I began telling the story of the last time I went camping and hunting in the woods around my parents' cabin. It was just like any other camping hunting trip I had gone out on. I packed a backpack with all the necessities, a .22 long rifle, an M&P, and a .45 that I would always carry. I parked my truck at my parents' place and walked down the dirt road until it disappeared into the woods. I make a point not to overhunt in any one area, so I hiked in a direction I knew I had never hunted in. After a few hours of hiking, I found a clearing in the woods that allowed some moonlight once it got dark. I don't use a tent when I camp alone, so setting up my camp was fairly easy. I got a fire going and quickly went to go find some small game for dinner before it got too dark. After bagging a few squirrels and a rabbit, I started to head back to my campsite. The night had already started to settle in, so it was getting quite dark on me. I took a moment to light up my lantern that was hanging off my backpack. I poured some lantern oil on it and got it going. A few hundred yards later, I heard a movement in the distance. Obviously, while moving through the woods with a backpack with a rifle strapped to it, you make a lot of noise yourself. However, the noises that came from deeper in the trees have a distinct sound, almost like an echo. So when I heard movement coming from somewhere else other than myself, I froze, staying completely still and listening. There was nothing. My brain started reasoning as fast as it could, and concluded that a branch might have fallen, or a deer might have gotten spooked and hightailed it out of the area. That was good enough for me, so I continued on through the dark in the direction I knew my campsite was in. The compasses don't lie, and I had learned how to use them and rely on them by this point in my life. I heard it, again. Noises coming from my right, north of where I was. And this time, I almost thought I heard a yell of some kind. Again, I froze, thinking it was coyotes. I'm not too worried about them, so I continued. The way back was starting to feel really long though.
But hiking through the woods during the day is very different than hiking through the woods at night. Most of the time you hike slower, watching your steps more carefully, so it's not unusual that a hike the same distance could take longer at night than during the day. Before I go on, I feel like I should say that I was recently married at the time. Most likely less than a year at that point. Like I wrote before, I travel a lot throughout my life, and homesickness was not something I was familiar with until I met my wife. I'll call her Juliet. We met when we were both 18, and up until then, I had never missed my home or anyone whenever I was away. But once we started dating, I began to finally experience the feeling of being homesick whenever I was away for too long, and in some cases, not even long at all. That Friday evening, towards the woods I had left, I got home from work and sat down with Juliet for dinner before leaving. It had only been a few hours since I last saw Juliet, and yet I missed her so badly out here in these woods. So much so that I think I almost felt pain. Having said that, I think it's gonna make what happened next a little more creepy. Anyways, so I heard something. I froze and stood still in the dark woods and turned to my right. I was deeply confused because I knew what I just heard. It was Juliet calling me. Even though it sounded like she was a bit far, there was no doubt it was her. What the fuck is she doing out here? There's gotta be some sort of emergency. I gotta find her. She's most likely been calling my phone, and it's not even on. Something bad must have happened, I thought, as my mind raced to rationalize and come up with a realistic conclusion. Chip, Chip, she yelled through the trees in the distance. My name isn't Chip, but it's the secret nickname that she has for me. I basically jogged through the dark forest towards where I last heard her calling me, stopping every now and then to listen for her again. Eventually I had to stop because I had not heard Juliet call out to me for a while. I stood there quietly, panicking for what must have been like 5 minutes, but every second was torturous. I felt like I failed to find my wife, to help her. She came all the way out here to find me because she needed me, and I couldn't even find my fucking way to her. And then, that's when I heard it again. Chip, Chip. Her voice quietly resonated through the tall trees, and she sounded like she was in pain. I began to walk as quietly as I could towards her, so I could hear her if she called out to me again. And she did. She sounded very much closer, and I was relieved as I felt myself getting closer and closer to her. Chip, Chip. This time, I was alarmed. I felt like I was about to be in danger, but I shook it off and continued towards my wife. Chip. Again, I kept listening to her calling me, but she didn't sound quite right. It almost sounded like it wasn't her at all. Just like two different people can say the same things in the same pitch and tone, but they can never sound exactly like each other. It was like there was someone else pretending to be my wife, and it was mimicking her voice, but I could hear her so clearly just a few moments ago. I figured she was choking up, trying not to cry, so I kept moving, again and again. I heard my wife calling out to me as I kept getting closer and closer. Each time she called though, her voice sounded less and less like her. By the time she sounded like she was only 10 or so yards away, I was on high alert. It sounded nothing like her by then. Whoever it was calling me wanted me to believe she was my wife, and by then, I knew for sure it wasn't her. I approached carefully with my handgun drawn. This person wasn't moving one bit, but I could tell where she was. I started getting closer, inch by inch, holding my lantern up in front of me, trying to see who I was dealing with. Then, peeking from around a tree, I saw two eyes reflecting the flame from my lamp. I have to admit, at that moment, I was fucking terrified. My wife is shorter than I am, and I was eye to eye with whoever this was, and her eyes were too far apart to have been Juliet's eyes. "Hey, is everything alright?" I asked her, like an idiot. "I can give you anything you want." I knew right away what she really was. I knew her malicious intentions. "Jesus, help me," I said under my breath in a fearful whisper. With my gun still in my hand, I safely aimed towards the ground with my finger off the trigger. As soon as those words left my mouth, she visibly flinched as if she had smelled something disgusting. I could tell by her silhouette and the reflections in her eyes though. I stood still, realizing what I had just said, while she backed away from me back into the darkness. Up until this point during my story, my buddy sat staring at me, completely silent, listening to me speak. "Dude, why the fuck didn't you just shoot her? You had a gun, didn't you?" said the youngest guy. I told him it would have been useless to shoot the witch out there. It wouldn't have killed her, or done any harm to her. "How? Why?" he replied. I began to explain to them what witches really are. People who practice witchcraft and offer rituals to demons they conjure in return for something they want. My theory was that this witch achieved her position through the sacrifice of people and animals. I could tell they were thinking it over and trying to decide whether to believe me or not. And to those listening, I know y'all might think this is crazy and not believable, and if I hadn't seen it at all before, I myself wouldn't even believe it. But the truth is, my parents were and still are very prominent figures in the church I grew up in. Being elders of the church community, they often perform exorcisms when I was a kid. And no, I don't mean the stereotypical Hollywood Catholic priest with a little white thing on his neck under a black jacket, holding up a wooden cross. They belong to a Hispanic Protestant denomination that in fact disagreed with and opposed Catholicism. Being too young to stay home alone, I was often taken with my parents on house calls to pull demons out of people. It was a horrible experience every single time. In Latino America culture, it's not uncommon for people and their kids to visit witch doctors, or even doctors who heal when somebody is feeling sick, or when they want their lives to move in a better direction, and sometimes when they want harm to come upon someone who has wronged them. However, being part of these rituals is like an open invitation for demons and leaves people open to demonic activity. So there was always someone in need of help in our community. I watched and listened to everything my parents did during exorcisms, and I had read every book my dad kept in his office about the subject. By the time I had this incident in the woods, I already knew what to do and what not to do very well. I continued my story after explaining a bit more to my buddies. As I was saying, I stood in the dark forest with my lamp held up, with my arms stretched out until I could no longer see or hear the witch backing away. My adrenaline took a while to finally settle down. Then, that's when the fear came. I tried walking back to my campsite quietly, but my nerves got the best of me, and I ended up almost running through the darkness. I was pretty confident I could find my way back, but either way, I kept checking my compass. After running and running in the correct direction, I never reached my campsite. I felt confused and doubted myself like never before. Maybe I really don't know anything about being out in the woods. How could I have gotten myself so lost? I turned around and walked until I saw a familiar pattern in the trees. Once I felt confident about where I was, I forced myself to walk back to where I ran into that witch. When I found the tree she was initially hiding behind, I stared at it for a good while, expecting her to peek around it again, but nothing. Thankfully, I retraced my steps back to where I had gone off the path to follow Juliet's voice. After hiking a bit longer, I found my campsite. I was exhausted, covered in sweat, scratched up, and hungry. I considered packing everything up and starting on the long walk back to the cabin, but I had no energy, so I called it a night. I didn't even sleep much even though I felt entirely drained. The woods were very loud that night, even by a summer night standard. The bugs and animals didn't stop to take a breath for a second, and the owls were very aggressive as well. I could hear them screaming near and far all night. Every time I began to drift off to rest, I would get awakened to the screams of the owls, echoing in the forest. Or at least that's what I assumed to be. I turned to look at the guys and asked them if they were still down to creep into the woods. They looked at each other and said, "Yes." "Well, y'all go ahead. I'm not going in there right now," I said, laughing to myself. "But it didn't even do anything to you. You scared her away," one of them replied. "Maybe, but it's only because I said the name of Jesus," I said. "Well, just say it again if she comes back, dude," he said, almost annoyed. "It's not that simple. I think you really have to believe for that to work. And I can say I really did believe back then. But now, I won't be calling on anyone to come help me." After I said that, I don't remember much about the night. Other than that, all of us ended the night by watching Blood Diamond in the cabin. It's the only movie that my parents have in there. I think it was already there when they bought the place. As for what I said about believing, I'm not 100% sure it's right. Most demons hate God and Jesus, and I'm not sure if they care if you believe in God or not. It's not that I don't believe in God anymore. However, the only reason I do believe is because I've seen the other side of things. That witch that I saw knew what I loved and what I missed, and that I would have done anything for my wife. I have seen, encountered, and even felt evil, but I have never felt God.
This is my true Skinwalker story. At the time of this experience, I had no knowledge, nor had I ever heard about a Skinwalker. I was 19 years old, and I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, with my parents while attending community college. My sister-in-law had asked me to go with her to Tuba City, Arizona, to visit with her mother and pick up some papers. Her mother was a school teacher there on the Navajo REZ. We would be staying there overnight. Her mother lived in one of those small government houses on the REZ. There were about 3 or 4 houses near her on a small paved street. Except for a few buildings near there, it was pretty isolated. My niece and nephew were with us, and we'll call my sister-in-law Mary, my nephew Mike, and my niece Amy. Mike was only 10 years old, and Amy was 9. It was early evening when we arrived in Tuba City. We had stopped at a fast food restaurant on the way to pick up dinner to go. After arriving at the house, we all laid together at a small kitchen table. We talked and visited a while before going into the small living room to watch TV. There wasn't a lot to do there, so Mary and I decided we would take a night drive and explore around the REZ. I know what you're thinking. It's a very bad idea, or a stupid idea. We drove around for about an hour and a half. Surprisingly, nothing weird happened. We were just laughing, talking, and listening to music as we drove up and down the dirt roads. After a while, we decided to head back. When arriving back home, we stayed up a little bit later, and then we decided it was time to go to bed. I slept in a small back bedroom on a twin bed next to a window with blinds. My nephew Mike slept on the floor in a sleeping bag in the same room. Mary and Amy were in the other room down the hallway. During the night, I was awakened by some strange,
scratchy noises outside the window by my bed. It sounded like something was making long, slow clawing sounds down the window, like when someone runs their nails down a chalkboard. I am a light sleeper, so this of course woke me up. I whisper out loud to my nephew Mike to wake up, asking him if he was hearing the same thing I was. Mike was sleepy and groggy, being awakened from a deep slumber, so he seemed confused at first. I asked him again if he had heard the scratching noise, but he didn't answer. He was just out of it. He then laid back down and was out like a light. I was perplexed and a little scared. I thought to myself maybe it was just a stray cat or dog, but I couldn't figure it out. I did, however, have no indication to look out that window, so I just lay there listening. After a few minutes, the clawing stopped. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I mentioned this at the kitchen table during breakfast, but no one seemed very interested. We left later that afternoon, and I never even thought about it again. 6 months later, I was attending one of my college courses. The teacher was lecturing us about different legends and stories of the Navajo people. He touched on the stories of evil medicine men, or witches, that are called Skinwalkers. He began telling us that they are very dangerous and harmful. They have the ability to turn into or disguise themselves as any animal. They could take the form of a coyote, wolf, or even a bear. They also been known to follow people home at night. That's why you should never be out on the REZ after dark. You're never supposed to make eye contact with the Skinwalker, because they can actually possess your soul. You should never talk about them, because you can draw them to you. They can cause issues and bring evil into your life. An icy chill went down my spine. I remember that night I had spent on the REZ. I wonder if a Skinwalker had followed Mary and me home that night after our drive. The realization that a Skinwalker had targeted us fills me with fear. I think of this often, and I'm so glad I didn't look out the window that night. I'm also haunted by the fact that there was just a very thin pane of glass separating me from such an evil thing. And now, I guess I know why no one in the family wanted to talk about it.
When I was a kid, my favorite time of the year had to be winter. There was just something about all the festivities that gave me a sense of wonder. It might sound a little cliche, or possibly a little cringy, but to me as a kid, the holidays felt magical. I would spend my winters watching my family put up all sorts of decorations around the house. Lights, ribbons, and I can't forget about the star attraction, the Christmas tree. My father and I had this tradition. Every year, we would venture out to our local tree farm, and he would let me run around and select our very own Christmas tree. It was one of the few times that my father and I had a chance to bond. He would tell me all these stories about his past, and how his own father would take him. Even though my father wasn't one to show emotion, I could tell that these trips to the Christmas tree forest actually meant the world to him. As the years progressed, my love for Christmas kinda diminished. I suppose that's something that just happens over the years. People get old, develop a new interest and responsibilities. During high school, I honestly couldn't care less about Christmas. To me, it was starting to just become another day, another pointless get-together with people whom I barely even know or remember. Maybe it was those rebel teenage years, but I just couldn't see the point anymore. That must have been the reason my parents stopped putting so much effort as they used to. Eventually, my father stopped offering to go Christmas tree shopping with me, and the holiday just sort of fell by the wayside. During my senior year in high school is when I met Sarah. She was incredible, and we instantly clicked. A few months after meeting, we began dating. Early into our relationship, I realized fairly quickly that her family took Christmas very serious. Every year I was amazed by all the decorations and how much they loved Christmas. It was honestly like something out of a Christmas movie. As time went by, Sarah and I moved in together. We had lived in different apartments over the years, until finally, we had saved up enough money to buy a house in the suburbs. As the year started drawing to a close, and the winter holidays were fast approaching, I wanted to try and rekindle my old love for Christmas. Once December came around, we went out, and I bought a ton of decorations. We filled up the house from wall to wall, with many different items. Decorations in every size hung in all the windows, and also on the doors. The lights had been strung up around the exterior of the house. It was most likely a bit too much, but I still had fun putting all the decorations up. Sarah and I had talked about what we were going to do about the Christmas tree. She offered to go buy a synthetic one at a store somewhere, but I told her I had a better idea. I explained to her about a weekend that my father used to take me tree shopping, and I told her how it used to be my favorite part of Christmas. Without missing a beat, she asked me when I wanted to go. We made plans to go shopping for one at the end of the week, and I'll be honest, that made me feel happiness I hadn't felt in years. Friday had arrived, and after getting home from work, Sarah asked me if I still wanted to go. I nodded, and with a smile, she grabbed her coat. We headed back out into the winter air and hopped into my truck. We drove 4 hours trying to find a decent tree farm. A few of them had already sold out, which was quite shocking to me. And other tree farms, well, their selection didn't look too great. After driving for nearly 45 minutes, we found a place. As we pulled into the lodge, the tires of my truck struggled to get any traction in the snow. Our shoes were crunching into the fallen snow, and we walked up to the gate. The trees that stood before us seemed to stretch in every direction. Sitting off to the side was an older man, who seemed to be reading a book by a portable heater. Sarah and I walked over to him, and he struggled to peel his eyes away from his book. In an effort to be funny, I asked him if he had any treats for sale, but the look that he gave me over the edge of his book didn't seem to be amused. With a heavy sigh, he rested his book into his lap and pointed out to the trees. Then he said, "Find one you like, and come let me know, and then I'll get it for you." I said thank you and entered through the gate, with Sarah following closely behind me. As we entered the forest, we both stared in wonder at all the options. Sarah quickly called me over and asked if this tree would be good. The tree was kind of tall to fit into our house. It was a great tree, but it was too big for the living room. We continued walking, looking around for that perfect tree. After a while, I realized I could no longer see the light from the entrance. The shift in the air was chill, and the warm glow of the light bulbs had been replaced by the cold moonlight overhead. Sarah rubbed her arms in an effort to stay warm, and I was beginning to realize that we needed to decide on a tree pretty quickly before one of us freezes out here. Then, we saw it. The perfect tree, only a few yards ahead of us. I grinned as we got closer, but as I was getting closer and closer, I heard Sarah whisper for me to stop. My feet stopped in place, and I turned back to look at her to see what was wrong. Sarah was staring off into the distance, her face more pale than I had ever seen before. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. She just kept staring. I followed her gaze and saw what she was looking at. Between a few trees off in the distance, 2 eyes were looking right back at us. The shadows cast by the trees around it were obscuring its body, but its eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness. I looked back to Sarah and she managed to whisper, saying that we should leave. I turned back to look at the eyes in the darkness. They were still there.
still wide, and still staring directly at us. Then, the eyes began to move out from the trees. As they did, they started to rise higher and higher above the ground. After a few seconds, the eyes were nearly half as tall as the tree it stood next to. It stepped out into the moonlight, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Its body was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It looked like some kind of beast. Dark fur covered it from its head to its toes. Massive clawed hands gripped the tree next to it, and I could see the tree strain from the pressure. Large horns were protruding out from its head, curling up and back from its body. It exhaled a deep breath through its nostrils. The gust of warm air visibly obscured its face for a moment. It took another step closer. The twigs beneath its feet were crunching loud as it approached. I could see its face a little bit better now. A dark liquid dripped from its lower jaw, staining the pure white snow beneath it. Sarah took a step back, and I could hear a twig snap below her foot. I turned my attention to her, and she was nearly crying at this point. The twig snapping was like a trigger. The creature started to roar, and this drew my attention back. That's when it started to run at us. But it wasn't running like a fucking animal. It was running like a person. And looking at this, my eyes went wide with panic, and I turned to Sarah, yelling at her to run. We both began sprinting through the snow, dodging the numerous trees as they passed us by. Even though we were both running as hard as we could, I could still hear that thing's footfalls growing closer and closer to us. Then, the sound of splintering wood echoed from behind us. I turned just in time to see a massive tree falling towards us with immense speed. I called out to Sarah to look out, and she moved away from it, when I did the same thing as well. The tree impacted the ground, and it shook the earth beneath my feet. I called for Sarah, asking if she was alright, and for a moment, there was no answer. I called again, and that's when a response came. I ran around the fallen tree, and I found her sitting near another tree. I held out my hand and helped her up. That's when we heard another loud shriek, coming from deep in the woods. We looked to one another before running out of the forest back into the light of the entrance. The old man looked up from his book and asked us if we found one we liked, but we paid him little mind as we ran out of the fence, hopped into my truck, and drove away. There's quite a bit of few different things in this world that I can't explain, and that night is at the very top of this list. I have no idea what that thing was. Maybe some of you out here have an idea, but I'm at a complete loss. I still love the holidays and Christmas, but this year, I think I'm just gonna buy an artificial Christmas tree, and I would advise all of you to do the same. Stay away from the forest, and be careful when you go in there, if you go in there to look for a Christmas tree. Last Monday, I went on a walk into the woods. I go all the time, whether it's spring or winter. I'm 18 years old. I'm not very tall, and I don't weigh much. So I'm a pretty fast runner too. Sometimes it can get really creepy out there in the woods. My mom and grandparents, they live right down the road, by the way, always told me that if I start to feel unsafe out there, I always need to leave. They never said why, but I always figured they were afraid of the coy dogs, and it never seemed that important. I did listen to them though. So Monday afternoon, maybe a bit past 4 o'clock, I left to go walking. I had been out there just 2 days before with no issues, but after walking for about half a mile, the feeling that I was being watched began. I kept walking until I came to the old logging road. It makes for a quick way around the woods, and it also connects to the road that my house and my grandparents' house are on. I was getting pretty tired of hiking through the snow-covered bushes and logs. I still felt like something was watching me, and just a few moments before, I could have swore I saw something moving around from the corner of my eye. So I decided to walk down the logging road instead. As I was walking down it, I heard the sound of chains rattling nearby and started looking around for them. I was thinking maybe it was just chains in a tree blowing in the wind, but I couldn't find any chains, and I stopped hearing it after a second. I kept walking and was getting close to my grandparents' land when I heard the chains again. I stopped walking to look around me and to check to see if maybe it was something I was wearing, my jacket, my necklace, but it wasn't anything on me. I jumped around to double check and maybe looked really stupid, but I knew it wasn't me making the noise. I decided just to go to my grandparents' house and walk back using the actual road. But as soon as I started heading into the woods, I heard something. It sounded like my own footsteps had been in time with a second pair that were maybe about 10 feet away, which made no sense because there had been nothing there just a moment ago. I took another step and heard something step at the same time from behind me. I didn't turn around. I was too afraid, so I acted as if I was going to take another step, but I stopped my foot right above the snow. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Behind me, whatever there was, stepped down. I heard the snow crunch, then it moved forward again, quickly. It must have known I figured out it was there. That's when I started running towards my grandparents' land, and whatever was behind me followed. It sounded humanish, and the sound of the chain started up again when it started chasing me. The thing definitely had only 2 legs, and it sounded pretty big. There's a lot of thorn bushes, small trees, and other things that stay around all year, even in the winter. When I ran between them as best as I could, it was just going right through them. I glanced behind me for a second, and all I saw was a really tall, gray, humanoid blur before I looked back in front of me. The final stretch was terrifying. I could hear heavy breathing and chains rattling just a few feet behind me the entire time, and it sounded like it was almost growling. My grandparents' dog was up in the yard near the house and started barking, but he didn't run towards me. He just stayed by the house barking. Then he ran with me to the house when I got close to him. I ran up the door and went inside. The dog came in right beside me, and I slammed the door shut. I didn't hear anything, and I looked out the window, but there wasn't anything there. The dog was leaning onto me and shaking. My grandfather came to the door from upstairs after just a few seconds, and I started crying and told him everything. He became very serious and told me, "Don't think about it. Just forget it ever happened." I tried to ask him why, but he refused to tell me anything. I tried asking my grandmother too, but she didn't say anything, and she changed the subject. When I was 13, I was on an ATV with my 2 older sisters, one 15 and the other 18. We were going to my grandma's place, which was less than 2 kilometers away from my parents' place. We were traveling through our fields, but on the way, I suggested we go around the fence so we didn't have to open the gates. It was pretty much the same road, just a bit off to the side. As we get to the middle of the field, we all noticed something sitting on top of the hill we were about to climb. We slowed to a crawl because it looked human. We thought maybe it was an animal that had fell and was stuck, or maybe it was my uncle who looked after the cattle. But this thing was sitting weird, basically like how Spider-Man perches over buildings, crouched down on top of a rock. I want to describe this thing. It was tall, skinny, and was wearing Nothing. Just the body is what we could see, grayish color, and the head wasn't shaped like a human's head. It was thin and small. We were about 30 to 40 meters from this thing, and it was during the day too. As we were sitting there trying to figure out what we were seeing, this thing slowly stood up and my heart sank. Its arms were long, very long. I screamed to stop and instantly jumped from the front of the ATV to the driver, replacing my sister. As we were switching, this thing started running at us, but it was running weird. Its arms were swaying back and forth like normal runner, but because of how long the arms were, it looked weird. You would think it would run on the long arms, but it didn't, and it was running fast. I turned around and shot off straight through the field. My sisters were screaming that it was still coming, but to be honest, I could not look back at this thing, so I just said, "Don't look at it." We rounded the corner, and that's the last we saw of it. As we got home, I crashed the ATV into the deck, trying to get in as fast as we could. We were so scared, my parents actually believed us. They called all the family to warn in case it was a trespasser. They said nobody saw anything or anyone in the fields after that.